Daf Tes Zayin Amud Beis will begin Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the bottom. We learned previously that water is one of the liquids that are makshir food l'kabel tuma. If the food comes into contact with the water and then to a source of tuma, it becomes tameh. And we learned that the water is makshir. It doesn't make a difference if it's mechubarim or tlushim. If it's water in its natural state, like in a mayan, or even if it's collected in a kli, it's been detached, it's also makshir. Frek the Gemara, is that so with tlushim? Mi makshirin. Can detached water, can it be makshir l'kabel tuma? V'hama Rabbi Yosef Rav Chanina, mashkin beis mitbechaya, the liquids of the butchering place in the base of Migdash, loy dayan shehem dochen, not only are they tor, ela she'ein makshirin, they're not makshir. One of the liquids in the base of Mitbechaya is water, and it's water that are tlushin. So don't you see that it's not makshir? Now it can't be that Midaraisa, it is makshir, and the Rabban said it's not. It could only be that Midarabbanan it's makshir, and they were not geyser in the base of Mikdash. So don't you see that detached water Midaraisa is not makshir? And the Gemara says no. Tirgma al dam. When it says that it's not makshir, it's not referring to water, it's referring to blood. It's referring to the dam. The dam is not makshir, but water can be makshir whether it's detached or attached or detached. Now, as Rashi explains, we know that other mashkin are also makshir. Now, other mashkin are makshir and they're clearly not attached. So what is the havamina really to say that water should not be makshir if it's detached? If we know that wine is makshir, shemen is makshir, so why shouldn't water be makshir? So Rashi explains, because water has its natural state that it's mechubar. These other liquids do not have a natural state of being mechubar. You might say that water is only makshir in its natural state, not when it's detached. So that's why we thought perhaps to make a chilik. And we wanted to bring a raya from the mashkin beis mitbechaya, and the Gemara says no. That it says that it's not makshir is not referring to the water; it's referring to blood. Tirgmal dan. The Omar Rav Chia bar Rav Amar v'Yechanan minayin ledam kachim sheina makshir. How do we know that the dam of kachim is not makshir? Shenemar ala haaretz tishbachanu k'mayim. It says l'gabei the dam of an animal, you spill it on the ground like water. So what type of dam is considered like water? Now water is the substance, the item that is a prototype of something that's makshir. The pasuk says, that is the prototype of something that's makshir l'kabel tuma. Now we say that blood is considered like water. So water is makshir, blood is makshir. But what type of blood is makshir? The type of blood that's tishbachana kamayim, that you spill onto the ground. What type of dam is that? So dam, it's dafka the dam said, dam shenishbach kamayim makshir, which is the dam of chulin, which is spilled onto the ground. But dam sheina nishbach kamayim, but dam of kach, which is not nishbach kamayim, is collected in the kli. You have to collect it in the kli to do zrik on the mizbeach, ain't a makshir. So it's not makshir. So that's what we're referring to over here. It's specifically the dam of the kach. Maskef lo rashul barami, harei dam atamsis. Well, what about the blood that trickles? Before the blood that spurts out, the blood trickles out, and after the blood that spurts, there's also a trickle. Now that dam that trickles is not the lifeblood. That's not the dam nefesh. That's called dam tamsis. Now that type of blood, that type of dam, is not kosher for the mizbeach. That is not the dam that we do the zrik on the mizbeach. The pasuk says, ki adam hu benefesh yichaper. Dam nefesh, the lifeblood, is what you use for kapara. That's what you put on the mizbeach. That's what your maz on the mizbeach, but not the dam tamsis. So this dam tamsis is in nishbach hamayim. It's not used for the mizbeach. It's poured out onto the ground like water. Ve'eno makshir, and it's not makshir. And it's not makshir. We see that the mashkin beis mitbechaya is not makshir. This is one of the mashkin beis mitbechaya, and it's not makshir. Doesn't that show you that even though it's like mayim, it's not makshir? Amalei Rabbi Sari says, Hanach ledam tamsis, leave that aside. Dafil bechulin nami loy machshir. That's not even machshir by chulin. So that's not a raya to our discussion over here, because that's not machshir bechlal, even by chulin. Why? Because that's not called a mashke. That's not called dam. So it's not water, it's not dam, it's not one of the mashkim that are machshir. So Kiblu Minei Rav Shmuel Barami, he was Mikabel as follows. Dama Rachmana, where do we see that Dama Tamsis is not machshir? Because the Torah says, Rak Chazak Levil Te'achol Hadam Ki Adam Hu Hanefesh. What is dam? How do we define dam? Blood. We define blood, which is lifeblood, which is the nefesh. Dam Shan Nefesh Yitzavoi Kori Dam. The dam with the life blood, where the nefesh goes out, that's called dam. Dam she'ena nefesh yitzaba, eina kor dam. But not where it's not yitzaba. So dam atamsis is not dam she'ena nefesh yitzaba. It's not called dam. It's bechlal not machshir, so it's not relevant to our discussion. Talshma, now the Gemara is going back to the sheet of Rav. The Rav says that not only are mashkim not matam other things, that they don't even have their own tumah midaraisa. So Shma Adam Shenditma Uzraka, blood of a korban became tomei, and he did this rika b'shegeg hurtza. If it was done b'shegeg, then it's hurtza. B'mezid loy hurtza. If it was b'mezid, it's loy hurtza. Now, as Rashi explains here and elsewhere, that the dam that sits as maratza on tumah, and so therefore the tzitzis maratza, really there's no difference if it's shogeg or mezid. The tzitzis maratza, and therefore a person is not allowed to have the kapara. He doesn't bring another kapara. He doesn't bring another korban. He's not allowed to bring another korban for this, for his chiyuv. It affects a kapara. It affects the kapara form. When we say over here, b'mezid loy hurtza, means midrabanan. Midrabanan, the rabbanan gave a knas, and the meat is also ba'achila. He cannot eat the meat. That's what it's meant in this context. But al kol panim, what's relevant to our discussion is that it says dam shenitma became tomei. So don't you see that there is tumas atzmai? The Gemara answers no, midrabanan. This tumah that we're talking about over here is the rabbanan. And it's the Deloy ki Yosef ben Yezer ish Shreda. It's not like Yosef ben Shreda that who says the mashke made b'dchai is dachin, and it is tohar. You see over here that it is over here tomei, that midrabanan or kolpan midrabanan, it is tomei. But what we mean over here is midrabanan. Tashma matzitz maratza. Another kasha to Rav. What is it? Tzitz maratza. The tzitz that the kohen gadol wears. What's maratza? Al adam, al abalsa, val chelev shenitma. It's maratza for tuma, whether it's dam or whether it's basar or chelev, bein b'shegeg, bein b'mezid. So whether it's shegeg or mezid, so it's hurtza, it's maratza, bein b'inus, bein b'ratzon, whether it was done b'inus, b'ratzon, or willingly. Bein b'yachid, bein b'tzibur, or yachid b'tzibur. So you see, however, that dam is mekabel tuma, that it could be mekabel tuma. So when he said that the mashke Yosef ben Yezer said the mashke beis mechayv is dachin, it must mean only legabe other things. But legabe tuma itself, it has its own tuma. Where says no, midrabanan. What we're referring to is only Tumah the Rabbanan, or Deloy Yosef ben Yezer Shreda, who said that the Rabbanan did not impose the Tumah on the Mashke Beis Menuchaya. No, it's not like him. It says even though it's the Rabbanan, nevertheless, they still impose the Tumah on it. Tashma, it says from the Bryce of an also Aaron, that's Avan HaKadosh, that the Levish of the tzitz, of the wearing the tzitz, Aaron, he bears the Avera of the Kodshim. V'chi Eza Ovan, who knows which Ovan does he bear? Im Ovan Pigel, if you say the Ovan of Pigel, like crying Nemar Lo Yeratze. The Torah says Lo Yeratze, it will not be accepted. If you mean to say of a nicer, the air of nicer, so what we mean in this context is of a nicer doesn't mean the meat that has been left over and is nicer. It means that it was the avodah was done with an intent that the achila should be chutz l'zmana, and therefore renders the korban nicer. So if it is with a korban that the machshava was with a machshavas nicer. It says lo yachoshev, it won't be considered. So he does not. He's not machaper for that. He doesn't bear that avera. So what is it? Ha'ina nicer alavan tuma. Must be that he's nicer alavan tuma. Why do we say tuma? Because we see there's an exception by tuma, the tuma hutra b'tzibur, that if the entire tzibur becomes tome, then we can bring the korban. So therefore, you see there's an exception to tuma. This is where it's meratza. So what is it meratza? What type of tuma? What is it meratza for? My love, tuma's dam doesn't mean the tuma of the blood. That what do we mean over here? We mean that it's maratza, that the korban is accepted. Well, there's an avoida for the korban. What was the avoida that was done over here? Must have been the avoida of the dam. Don't you see that min ha-Torah, midaraisa, there is tuma on the mashkin. Amra papa loy, tumas kimotzi. Now, it's not referring to the dam that was tome, because there's no tumah on the mashkin. It's referring to the tumah of the kamotzim, the kaimitz of mincha, the kaimitz of the mincha, they were makter on the mizbeach, and that's what it's referring to, that if it became tomei, there, that's what the tzitz is maratza on. The tzitz is maratza on the tumah of the kaimitz, but it's not referring to the dam. Lamaisa, it seems to be that there's a steer between the two previous prices that we mentioned, Lagabi the tzitz being maratza. Because we learned that the tzitz is maratza. Previously, we learned that tzitz is only maratza if it was b'shegig, not b'mezid. And the brisa previously that we just learned says bein ba'inus, bein b'rosin. It says whether it's bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid, bein ba'inus, bein b'rosin, bein b'yachid, bein b'tzibur. So it seems to be a steer in the brisa. The Gemara Daf Pei answers it by saying there's a chilik and there's two mandamrim. One is machalik between whether the tuma came b'mezid, or the tuma came b'shogeg, or between whether the haktorah was b'mezid, or the haktorah was b'shogeg. It's machalik between the tuma becoming b'mezid, tomi b'mezid shogeg, or the haktorah on the mizbeach shogeg the mezid. So another kasha Torah. The pasuk says, it's the pasuk in Chagai, when Bnei Yisrael came from Bavel back to Eretz Yisrael. After the Golus Bavel, they came back to Yisrael. So Chagai tested the Kahanim to see if they knew the Hilchas Tumah V'Tara, if they knew the Hilchas Kodshim. It was after 70 years of the Golus, so he wanted to see if they were familiar with the halachas. So he says as follows, the pasuk says as follows, Hey Nisa Ish B'Sar Kodesh B'Chna Bigdai. If a person carries B'Sar Kodesh, which means Tomei, in this context it means Tomei, meaning if he has something which is Tomei, for instance, he has a sheretz in the corner of his bag. The sheretz is an avatuma. And that touched the lech, vela nozit, or nozit vela yain vel shemen, v'kol machal, or any other machal. So the question that he was testing him on was, is there a revi b'kaidish? In Chulin, Tuma goes to the level of Sheni. Truma to a shlit, she was testing them, is there a revi by kodshim? It doesn't go even to the level of a revi by kodshim. So he says, if there's a b'sar kodesh, if there's a sheretz is an avatum, and it touches a lechem, so it makes a lechem into a rishon. Well, a nozid, and the lechem touches a nozid, it makes a nozid, it makes it into a sheni. Well, a yain, it makes it into a shlish. Well, a shemen, and makes a shemen revi. Ve'el kol machal, the way Rashi learns it is, or any other machal, not that and another machal. If it the yain touched the shemen or any other machal. So, therefore, he asks, is there a revi? That's the way Rashi learns it. So the way Rashi learns is that Hey Nisa Ish B'Sar Kodesh B'Chnav Bigdai. It's not that the beged touched, it's the sheretz touched. Because if it would be the beged, there's no significance in the knaf, in the corner of the beged. If the sheretz touched the beged is tomei. It doesn't matter the corner or any other part. So Rashi learns it's the sheretz that touched. The sheretz touched the lechem. And now at the end, when it says ve'el kol machal, it doesn't mean and the shemen touched any machal. It means the yain touched shemen or any other machal. That's the way Rashi learns. The Tosfos argues because he says, why should it say that ve'el kol machal means or any. The whole list is not talking about or, it's and. Why should we say that? So Taisus learns, the sheretz is the beged. The beged, so the beged is a rishon, the beged touched, so then the beged touched the lechem, so which makes it into sheni, or the nozit, or it is a nozit, or it made the nozit into a sheni. Ve'el yain, and then that what touched the yain is shlishi. Ve'el shemen, or the shemen, ve'el kol machal, another machal. So at the end of the day, it's still a shayla revi, but Taisus learns that it's consistent throughout the pasuk that the list is not and, it's or. So it's going throughout the whole list, and it's or. That it's lechem, ve'el nozid, and the stew means or the stew. So that's the way Rad Taisus learns. But Kolponim, the shayla is a revi b'kaidish. Hayikdish will become Tomei. Haggai asked the Kahanim, Vayanu Kahanim, and they answered, Vayamru Loi, and they said no. And they said it's not Tomei. Valma Rav, and Rav says, Ishtabesh Kahani. He said they made a mistake. They made a mistake. There is a Reviva Kaidish, and they said there is not. But what do we see over here? We're talking about wine. We're talking about oil. And you see that there's Tuma Silchere. It's a kasha. It's a kasha. From the Pasuk, you see that there is Tuma by the Mashkim. Al Kolpanim, at least mid Rabbanan, but you see that there's Tuma. So, more answers, Midu Time El Rav. You're asking on Rav. This is a question you're asking on Rav. It's not a kasha, because Rav Mashke Beis Mid Bechayatani. When he said that Yosef ben Yezer said that it's Dochen, that it's Tohor, and Rav said that he meant to say that it's completely Tohor, he said, yes, but it's not talking about Mashke Be Midbechaya. It's talking about Mashke Be Mitbechaya. It's not talking about things that are brought onto the Mizbeach. It's talking specifically about the liquids, the mashkim, that are in the butchering place, the place where they do the butchering. Now, what are the mashkim that are over there? That's mayim, and that's dam. Those mashkim. Aval mashke be midbechaya, but as far as the mashkim that are put on the Mizbeach, in the Chanami Matami, he's mighty that it's tam. Where he said that it's not Tomei, and when Yosef ben Yezer said, Mashke be mitbechai, Dochen, it's Torah legamri, it's Mashke be mitbechai. So that's referring to blood and water. But these mashkim that are on this list in the Pasuk, the yain and the shemen, that's not on the Mashke be mitbechaya, that's on the Mizbeach. And in Chanami, they are makabel tumah.